death and growth of companies surges at the point where personal goals align with business goals. But what happens when someone walks in the door and offers an attractive price in exchange of your business? Will selling be your option? You are welcome to the Bridgewater Perspective, and my name is Ernest Clenham Caesar. I'm with the Mergers and Acquisitions Desk at Bridgewater Advisors. Today I have with me Enyam Asamoah, Senior Manager, M&A. You are welcome to the show, Enyam.
Thank you, Ernest.
Selling your business, is it a legacy or not? Is our topic for today. Now, Enyam, we often hear that buying a company is beneficial, but is this ever the case for the seller? Is selling a business ever beneficial?
So in order to answer that question, I think it's best to look at why businesses are set up in the first place. So there are many reasons why people begin or start a business, but one of the reasons, or two of the main reasons why people start businesses is usually for financial gain or to solve a particular problem. So just as you would start a job or you look for a job at a particular place to get income, people start businesses to make financial gain. So you spot a gap in the market and then you take steps or invest in that, in solving that gap or closing that gap, whether it's supply, demand gaps, whatever it is, in order to make financial gain. Or it can be to solve a particular problem. So some entrepreneurs have seen certain problems in society and then they think per their skills or knowledge they can start a business to be able to solve that problem. And sometimes it's just entrepreneurs being entrepreneurs, but then the business side of things comes into play. So looking at these two reasons, you'd want to, in order to answer the question, we can evaluate selling a business and what that presents to the seller. So if it's the aim of setting up the business is basically to gain financially, then selling a business can be a means of gaining, because when you sell the business, you immediately or at that point liquidate your investment. So that includes the capital invested, the time invested, the passion and everything that you put into the business is being liquidated into cash or whatever asset it is that is in exchange for the business. So at that point, it means that you have gained in terms of being able to realize the objective for setting up the business. But if it is to solve a particular problem, then you need to evaluate whether selling that business means that another party or another group of parties are able to solve that problem better than the one currently owning the business is able to do so. So sometimes you start a business, but it gets to a certain point where you are constrained by either your knowledge, skill, or capital. So when you sell the business, you allow parties with the capacity to be able to solve that problem or to even bring a different dynamic to how that problem is being solved, whether it's through technology advancement or it's just a different way of doing things, then in that scenario, selling the business, that's become beneficial because you get to see that the problem you wanted to solve is actually being solved. So from that perspective, or from these two perspectives, the selling business, your business can actually become beneficial to the seller.
Okay, so we understand that from different perspectives, people might sell their business to liquidate investment or to ensure continuity of problem solving. But to the entrepreneur who founded their business from scratch and has seen it grow to substantial heights, is selling not putting everything at risk to gain temporarily?
That's an interesting question. But picking up from where, or the answer I gave to the previous question, it comes back to what opportunity selling that business presents to the seller or the entrepreneur. So usually you see that entrepreneurs start businesses or form an innovation or something that they seek to contribute to society. But sometimes, especially in a scenario where the entrepreneur is aging, there is that lid on how much you can actually contribute. So depending on where the entrepreneur is at that point of their journey in terms of their business, the sale of the business can actually be beneficiary in terms of not giving up what they have put in or the investment, but rather giving it an opportunity to thrive further. So when an entrepreneur gets to the point where they have to retire, so age constrains them, and they are able to find a successor within their circle. Sometimes people say they are creating or starting businesses so they can hand it over to their children. But you find that these children are not interested or may not have the ability to take it on to the next generation as the founder is able to do so. But in selling the business where you actually plan to hand over to another party, so you have the opportunity to spot who can actually take over and do it well, then for the entrepreneur it presents a good opportunity, and also gives the entrepreneur the opportunity to let go of the business risk. Because as much as you would want to contribute to society, given your skills and everything, it comes with running a business comes with risk, and there can be economic downturn. Anything can happen. There can be a competitor that comes into the space and takes over. So there's that business risk where everything can be wiped out, and sometimes even to the extent of debt. But when you successfully hand over at a certain point, especially when the timing is right, then it presents a good way for the entrepreneur to diversify their risk. You can invest that money into something less risky, or you can also have that comfort and that understanding that you are handing over the business to a capable party. So these are some of the benefits an entrepreneur can get, and if it all depends on how the sale is approached and what is done to ensure that it actually goes according to what the entrepreneur wants to see it.
Alright, so there are many benefits the entrepreneur stands to gain by selling the business, some of which include diversifying their business risk and also ensuring the continuity of the operations of the firm to meet its objectives. But then how can the founder ensure that new owners do not distort the dream or purpose, or is selling the end to the reign and therefore the influence?
Okay, so that can be approached in two ways. So in order to maintain that influence, that founder can sell a part of the business and not all. So you relinquish the everyday being at the helm of affairs in terms of the everyday running of the business, but then not relinquish control per se, so that the vision that you as a founder has for the business is maintained, or at least you are able to ensure that it is implemented. But in the scenario where the founder does not want to maintain control, then it's easier when the business is sold to a financial investor. In that scenario, the financial investor is more interested in gaining from what has already been set up. Because with a strategic investor, that investor may have his own plan, which may not necessarily be the same as what the founder has or intends to carry out. So it really depends on the structure of the transaction or how the deal or how the sale goes. But it can be done in such a way that the founder still maintains some control. But fundamentally, like I mentioned earlier, what's the aim of the business? It may be that the founder thinks that this is the way to go, but you would find that there are many ways to kill a cat. But it's just in understanding that whoever is taking over the business has the ability to see it through. It may not always go the way that you would want it, but if you need to make a decision as a founder as to whether it's gotten to that time where you want to let go, or to allow someone else to take over. So sometimes losing control, depending on the structure, does not necessarily mean that the vision or the dream is going to die, or you have actually relinquished it. So it all depends on how it's looked at.
Alright, so losing control does not mean that the vision has to die. That's a good one. We have heard of the term seller's remorse, which is a feeling of regret a seller gets at the time the sale reaches a close or just after the sale. This is said to be common with business owners in Africa. How do you think a founder can avoid this?
Okay, so I would say just as you have or you're fond of something which is in your possession and you lose it, even when you've actually planned to sell it, it's natural to have that emotion. And I don't think it's peculiar to African businesses alone. But one way to deal or handle that is to prepare for the sale. And in preparation, once again, you look at what's the objective of the sale. So if the sale allows the founder or the shareholder to achieve that objective, it's easier to let go of the business and to prepare that it's being satisfied with who comes in at what price, when the handing over is done. All of that allows for that emotion, although it may have shadows in the background, to be handled well and being psychologically prepared for the sale. I think that is preparation is the key to dealing with that emotion, which is not necessarily peculiar to African businesses. But as we know, with everything that we own, it comes with sentiment, especially if you're a founder that started a business out of passion. You saw it go through all the different stages of the business life cycle. It's natural to see it as your baby, which most of them refer to their business as, and it's maybe difficult to part ways with. But if you prepare for the sale, you think about it, you plan when it would occur, who you hand it over to, it makes it easier to deal with that emotion.
So preparation is the key dealing with the seller's remorse. How can one maximize the value of a business in a sale?
That's an important question, because in considering the sale, one of the important things to consider is the value. Are you going to achieve the maximum value there is? Definitely there would be some value you would gain, but is it the maximum value you can achieve? There are many ways to look at it, but one of the important things is to time the sale, because timing is important in concluding on value. So at a time where economic conditions are good, there are different businesses that thrive in different economic environments. So understanding when your business is thriving, understanding that it's a good time where profits are good and it's everything that drives value for your business is actually ripe at that point. It means that you will be at the bargaining power or bargaining end of the sale. So you'll be able to call off a price that is satisfactory. So timing is very important, and you can only get the timing right if you prepare well. So if you understand that when my business reaches a certain level, sometimes you can actually time the sale of your business to where a certain value is achieved, where you work with your advisors to drive the business to get to that point of value. Then the timing can be right, and then the sale can be right. What is also important is not being keen on just one party in the sale. So when you have that open-ended, well-managed, open-ended auction of your business, you are open to options. Having options is always good for the seller. So when you manage the sale, you get the timing right, you open up for different bids to your business, then you are able to make the right decision that gives you the right value. But regardless of all of this, there's always that thought at the back of your mind that if I hold on further, would I gain more value? But being able to understand that there are risks that comes with time, and planning the sale to maximize the time would make you end up with the maximum sale.
All right. So to maximize value in a sale, the seller has to make sure they prepare well. They keep an open-mindedness to who they are trying to sell to, and also pay particular attention to the timing, as businesses offer different values at different economic times. Wow, so selling your business is not an end to the legacy of the seller, but rather it provides a means for which the business owner's legacy can live on. Thanks for joining in, and catch us on the next episode of The Bridgewater Perspective.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, leave us a comment and subscribe to the Bridgewater Perspective. You can also send your questions to theperspective@bridgewatergh.com. The information contained in this podcast is of a general nature and is not intended to address the circumstances of any particular individual or entity. No one should act on such information without appropriate professional advice after a thorough examination of the particular situation. Bridgewater does not accept or assume any liability, responsibility, or duty of care for any consequences of you or anyone else acting or refraining to act in reliance on the information contained in this podcast or for any decision based on it.